School of the Orisha. Ekorisa Afro-Cientirat Pedagogy and Education. I love the Africa of my ancestrals and I'm proud to be Black 21st Century African Renaissance. Work carried out in compliance with Law 10,639/03, Afro-Brazilian and African Culture in Education. Ivan Poly OSUNFEM by ELEDUIBON. Pedagogy of the Orisha Ekoria Ivan D. A. Silva Poly OSUNFEM by ELEDUIBON. I dedicate this work to my late spiritual brother Ogundielabitong, who was in Brazil between February and May 2015, my brother from the diaspora who initiated me in the study of the cult of Ifa in his quality as a Babalawo and son of the orbit of Osogbo in Nigeria. Spiritual leader, head of the Balabolka Elabitong, my dad spiritual. I dedicate it his constructions also at leaders traditional of rebirth African, as my dad Ifeanyi Elabitong and Prince Serge Guzo, heir to the throne of Dahomey, who recognize me, so like mine work, like member and part of this rebirth. I cannot fail to mention in this dedication my thanks to Mother Stella Diaco Ko, Maria Stella in Azevedo Saints, 1925 to 2018, so as at your precursors matriarchs of the LHAX Opio Fond, Oba B. Mayananhog, Eugenia Ana dos Santos, 1869 to 1938, Hoxam New and Mother Senora, Maria Babayana. Do Eshrito Santa, 1890 to 1967, and Edwintona Mother Mies Inha, Andina Valeria Pigmental, 1916 to 1975, all with their histories of true heroines in the defense of our traditional communities of African origin, as well as the values civilizing what one nation inherited from these traditions. Reviews the sociology gives reproduction. Looking for alternatives, in a theoretical framework that would explain the phenomena I observed in the Living with the Ramakrishna Foundation, I came across the works of Bernard Lahire, highlighting, about everything, though book success school us means popular, at reasons of unlikely. Date from existentialists such as Sartre made me shock and somehow question the Bourdieu's pessimism and, consequently, the determinism with which this pessimism is appropriated by the academic environment, and I only found the sociological theoretical framework favorable to my own experience in studying Lahire's research. Another author who consolidates this issue is Eleanor 2004, when he clearly delineates the differences between inculcating education and emancipatory, clearly observed in the examples studied by Lahire and in the reflection of Bourdieu, regarding an education system that needs to create new cultural relationships so that make it possible the emergence in new social relationships. Bernard Lahire's 1997 research, in the work just mentioned, consisted of verifying, through interviews carried out with families from popular areas in the suburbs of large cities' French schools, the reasons for the success and failure of students at school, taking as a starting point at national exam scores. Teaching French fundamental. Among the several cases studied by the author, I highlight three, in my view, relevant. First, the feeling of cultural inferiority. Second, the relationship of cultural strength. And third, an ideal case. Both the latter deal with opposite cases to the former, and the question of identity and cultural affirmation is central. Before expose the cases, the researcher ponders, in certain cases in failure school, conflict cultural it is double for the child. While to be socialized for group familiar, is it over their transports for universe school schemes behavioral and mental, that end up preventing understanding and creating a series of misunderstandings. But living new forms of social relations at school, the child, whatever their degree of resistance to school socialization, they internalize new schemes cultural that takes for the universe familiar and what they can, most or any less, according the family configuration, leaving her hesitating in relation to her universe of origin. School failure is then the product of a conflict both between the child and the school. How much in between the child and you members of your family? Lahire, 1997, page 171-172 quotation marks of author. Thus, Lahire points, in your search, for the fact of what one of reasons of success or failure school resides at structure familiar, exemplifying, in both cases, this one factor as one of the determinants of student achievement at school. Another factor that the author exposes in the research, as a determinant for school success or failure, is the need for schooling from to any less from members gives family what serve of reference to the child, the way like the members give settings familiar live and treat. The experienced child's school, relating, sometimes, through him. His own past school experience, happy or unhappy, is shown to be a central element in understanding certain situations. School children. Lahire, 1997, page 172. The author's analysis highlights the issue of previous experience of the schooling process of the family members as a preponderant factor, which will influence the child's school trajectory. Therefore, if there is no such previous experience, the author, by the examples shown in his research, points out that the child will be at a disadvantage in relation to others, compared to those whose relatives had it as experience, especially if the experience has been well successful. The third factor that the author puts as determinant in the failure or success in school of surveyed students is the cultural and identity affirmation of family members in relation to the arbitrary cultural that is the school culture and, consequently, the stimulus they give to the child in the sense of these same affirmations, cultural and identity. In the following excerpt, Lahire clearly explains what is this relationship. According to Search, the adults in the family sometimes live in a humble relationship with the school culture and with legitimate institutions and can convey to the child their own sense of cultural indignity or incompetence. But, on the contrary, they can communicate the sense of pride they experience in the face of the child's good school results, or then look with benevolence at the child's schooling, despite the distance that separates them from the school world. Family inheritance is therefore also a matter of feelings of security or insecurity, self-doubt or self-confidence, unworthiness or pride, modesty or arrogance, deprivation toward dominion, and the influence, in schooling of children, gives streaming in feelings it is important, one turn what? That social relations, by the multiple predictive injunctions they engender, are producers of effects in beliefs individual well real. Lahire, 1997, page 172-173. Quotation marks of author. Let's see U3 cases, in between U25 studied per Lahire at Search, what I separated for exemplify better the subject. The first case concerns a family of Portuguese origin, whose parents suffered from a feeling in inferiority cultural, given your origin, in one France where the pattern cult gives tongue. French language excludes and marginalizes them from their culture of origin, fact for which they do not seek alternatives. They do not react, that is, they do not affirm their culture and their identity before the community. Of this form, allowed what your son did submit the oppression cultural of arbitrary cultural inculcated by the school environment, which becomes a reason for school failure, especially with regard to appropriation of the culture pattern of language factor of oppression by the child. Lahire, 1997, page 173, 181. In the two following cases, the author describes two families of Arab origin in which, in addition to offer one solid structure in values morals based in your cultures in origin, for at least one of those responsible has gone through some process of schooling and appropriation of a language in their cultures of origin. Contrary to the first case, they affirm their cultures and identities before their children, encouraging them to have the same type of behavior. Thus, resist the inculcation of the cultural arbitrariness of the ruling class, preventing their children marginalize their cultures or lose their references of origin, the basis of their constitution's identity. In these families, you sons has you best results at the exam national in between you students from means popular and same in between you students what participated of exam. And know it is first fact in who value their identities and cultures of origin who develop deficiencies in the appropriation of the normative variant of language, the culture pattern of language, which one wants to promote through the inculcation of the cultural arbitrary gives class dominant. Lahire, 1997, page 190206. In any case, Lahire, in his research, expands the importance of the need for identity and cultural affirmation, not only with regard to the process of appropriation of language, but to the whole process of school success or failure. Not shying away from it, after I went through the experience at the Ramakrishna Foundation, my own symbolic universe, through my process of identity and cultural affirmation, increased in such a way that, if until then mastered 3 languages with some degree of proficiency, I learned about 10 languages, mainly in time and what lived at Europe. In the 3 cases, the 2 from Lahire and the 1 observed at the Ramakrishna Foundation, where the identity and cultural affirmation in the process of appropriation of the normative variant of language, if an expansion of the symbolic universe through the reaffirmation of the culture of origin of the individuals in question. So that, while reaffirming their identity, the expansion and linguistic enrichment enabled students to master variant codes norms of the studied language. In this way, this process of appropriation of the normative variant of a language occurs contrary to what Bourdieu claims, without the linguistic habitus of these individuals be marginalized. On the contrary, it contributes to the enrichment and reaffirmation of their own references in origin. Of this form, for these individuals, About Everything for You students gives Foundation Ramakrishna. Due to the methodology, the school is no longer the space for cultural reproduction which, in turn, determines relations of social reproduction. It becomes the space that, by enriching the universe itself symbolic and by reaffirming the identity of the group, it allows the normative variant of the language to be aggregated to the symbolic universe of these individuals, and not inculcated. Even if this variant, for these people, do not stop being a cultural arbitrary, it is assimilated and added to the universe symbolic of these individuals, through their cultures of origin. This gives a different charge to the relations of force that this cultural arbitrary, by being inculcated rather than aggregated, plays at the context of action pedagogical as an act of violence symbolic. Another important factor in this process of appropriation of the normative variant of language through the expansion and enrichment of the symbolic universe of origin of the individuals is that, at the node reproduce the culture gives class dominant, marginalizing the culture in origin from individuals, from the access to different social spaces, that is, both the culture of origin and the one to which the individual will have access to from the acquisition gives variant normative of language. In Bourdieu's example, the inculcation of the cultural arbitrariness of the ruling class in appropriation of language marginalizes the linguistic habitus of individuals who are not part of it, delimiting both cultural and social space. Just the opposite of what happens with the identity and cultural affirmation, which expands the symbolic universe of individuals and expands their cultural and social spaces, in a process of appropriation of the normative variant of language without the loss of reference's origin. Other examples in which this phenomenon occurs arise, for example, in countries such as Germany, between dialectal Germans and Hochdeutsch Standard, official German, and in Italy, between Italians' dialects and the Italian pattern based at tongue in Dante. At France in Bourdieu, occurs the same with you paths of Pays d'Ux, regional speeches, and Au Francian French gives Isle in France, the region where stays Paris. When Bourdieu refers the inculcation in an arbitrary cultural in the reproduction, refer to this cultural arbitrary as close to the culture of the Paris elite and to the linguistic habitus of the ruling class Parisians as a normative variant of the French language, which is the largest influence of academic French. Bourdieu himself, being from the French countryside, suffered this process of discrimination, promoted by the inculcation of this cultural arbitrariness, for not being of Parisian family origin class culturally dominant. This, without doubt, had influence in your constructions and in your theories, so much in Reproduction Bourdieu, PASSERON, 1992 as in the Economy of Linguistic Exchanges Bourdieu, 1996. It is important to remember that, as far as the humanities are concerned, theories of authors, not infrequently, they are related to your own experience.